Boldwood presents Victory for the Foyles Bookshop Girls, written by Elaine Roberts and read by Helen Keeley. Chapter 1. Alice stifled a yawn as she stood huddled with her friends Victoria and Molly near the counter in Foyles Bookshop, their voices low as they snatched a moment between customers to catch up. Molly eyed Alice.
You're looking tired. Maybe you're trying to do too much. I mean, you work here, drive an ambulance, and that's without the family time, which I'm sure keeps you busy on its own. Are the boys keeping you awake at night? They must get frightened when the bombs drop, let alone the ground shaking and all the shouting that goes on as people rush for cover.
Alice stared down at her hands, the knuckles white as one hand gripped the other. They don't know what it's like to live in peacetime. This so-called Great War has gone on for so long they don't very often stir. Thankfully, living with my parents along with my brother and sister and Mrs. Headley, who all love to look after the children as much as they can, frees up a lot of my time. Of course, like others, I now sleep in the basement with them, so we don't have to wake the boys to take them down there in the middle of the night when the bombs are dropping. Her gaze travelled between her friends. Freddie has had difficulty sleeping at night for some time, but his nightmares seem to be getting worse, or at least more frequent. It seemed sensible for me to stay in the basement with the boys, with them both being under 4 and he stays upstairs. At least there they can't hear him and don't get frightened when their father shouts out in his sleep. Victoria reached out and squeezed Alice's arm.
You never said. You know we're here for you.
Alice nodded. Thank you. It means a lot to me. I don't know where I'd be without our friendship. But I'm not the only one going through this, we all are. We must just try and survive it the best we can, and be there for each other like we always are. Glancing at Molly, she smiled. What is it you always call us? The Three Musketeers, all for one and one for all. Molly giggled. That's right, and it's got us through this never-ending war. Smiling, Alice shifted her gaze around her. Of course, there's the other half of that quote. United we stand, divided we fall, which also describes our friendship. Victoria laughed. So we really are the Three Musketeers. The warm June sun filtered through the large windows of London's Foyles Bookshop, casting a glow on the rows of second-hand books lining the shelves. Alice shook her head. The trouble with this time of year is the sunshine shows up all the dust. She glanced round. It's been fairly quiet today. I expect everyone is at the park enjoying the sunshine. Molly peered over her shoulder at the shelves. Trust you to notice the dust. Let's hope Mr. Ledbetter hasn't, otherwise we'll all be on dusting duties again. She rolled her eyes. I swear, if I have to shelve one more book on the war, I'll scream. Whatever happened to losing yourself in another world away from this one? She brushed a stray strand of blonde hair from her face. Victoria laughed, her engagement ring catching the light as she gestured. Well, at least you're normally in the children's section, which has lots of different worlds to escape to. Although I know what you mean. I've been trying to push some of the new poetry collections. I even put some in the window display, but I don't think it has made any difference. I thought a bit of beauty to balance out all the, well, you know. Alice nodded, her eyes darting to the floor as the bell chimed, signalling a new customer. Victoria frowned. I'm concerned you've never mentioned Freddie's nightmares before. Has he always had them? I mean, since he came back from the front? Alice nodded. Not so much at first. But I know from listening to the soldiers at Victoria train station and at the hospital that it's quite normal. When Freddie came home, the war didn't appear to have affected him as much as others. He was just glad to be home, and I was pleased to have him back. She sighed. But I think his nightmares are getting worse, and I don't know how to help him, especially as he won't talk about it. He just pretends it isn't happening. Molly raised her eyebrows. How did he manage to hide them when he came home? I mean, Andrew has the nightmares when he's not at the bank. He's throwing himself day and night into helping other veterans. You know, trying to find them work and somewhere to live. Most of the time he looks worn out, but he won't talk about it either. Alice lowered her eyes. I don't think he hid them in the way you mean. He just didn't want to worry or frighten me and the children. It soon became apparent he was sleeping less and less each night for fear of waking us up with a start. I think he has a sleep at the police station before he starts work, and at lunchtime, as well as before he comes home, although he says he doesn't. Victoria shook her head.
It's difficult for you, Alice. I mean, it's difficult for Molly too, but because you live with your family and you have the boys, you obviously don't want to get into an argument over it. Whereas Ted and I can have proper, frank discussions because Daisy is often working at the police station.
Daisy was Victoria's younger sister.
Have you talked to him about seeing someone?
Molly asked, reaching out to squeeze Alice's hand. Alice shook her head.
You know, Freddie, he insists he's fine,
That he just needs time. But it's been a couple of years now, and with the boys... Their conversation was interrupted by Mr. Ledbetter's voice, calling from the back room. "Ladies, I know it's quiet in the shop today, and it won't be long before we're shutting up for the night, but Albert is swamped in the basement, so maybe we could find someone to help him check the books?" He pulled at the bottom of his black waistcoat as he walked into the shop before glancing at Victoria. "Miss Appleton, I know you three are good friends, but can I please remind you that you're paid to make sure everything runs smoothly and not to stand around chatting?" He gave a faint smile. "Mrs. Greenwood, should you not be upstairs in the children's section?" Molly nodded.
Yes, sir.
She stepped away from her friends. Mr. Ledbetter raised his eyebrows. "If it's all so quiet upstairs, everyone can start dusting the shelves and the books that sit on them. I'm surprised you ladies hadn't noticed the dust in this sunshine." Alice leaned over the counter and picked up a rag.
I'll start near my counter because I can then keep an eye out for customers as well.
"Thank you, Mrs. Laybourne. We've always taken pride in what we sell here, so let's keep it that way." Mr. Ledbetter turned away and noticed a soldier down one of the aisles browsing the books. He wondered if he was there for the solitude and the peace that came with books. The man looked up, and Mr. Ledbetter nodded before going back to his office. With sighs and knowing smiles, the three friends dispersed, each lost in thought about the challenges that awaited them beyond the sanctuary of the bookshop. As they worked, surrounded by the comforting smell of paper and ink, each woman silently drew strength from the bond they shared. A friendship forged in peacetime, but tempered by war. They knew all too well the toll the war had taken on those who'd returned. Alice picked up the clean tea towel to start drying the soapy dinner plates Mrs. Headley, the housekeeper, had been washing up in the sink. Mrs. Headley smiled.
You shouldn't be doing that. You'll get me the sack. You should be upstairs playing with them boys.
The house on Bloomsbury Street echoed with the sound of children's laughter and the clatter of dishes. Alice stood near the draining board, a small smile playing on her lips as she strained to hear Freddie's deep voice regaling their sons with a bedtime story. "And then the brave knight raised his sword high." Freddie's voice grew louder and drifted downstairs from the boys' bedroom, followed by excited gasps from 3-year-old Arthur and a giggle from 7-month-old David. Mrs. Headley chuckled.
You know, I remember you having Arthur like it was yesterday.
She shook her head.
I don't think there's a sound in this world that beats a child's laughter. Mr. Laybourne is clearly tickling young David while telling Arthur his story. He's a good man.
Alice's smile slowly faded. She remembered a time when Freddie's stories might have been filled with dragons and magic, not knights and battles. The war had changed him in ways she was still trying to understand.
Yes, he is, Mrs. Headley. But don't forget it's thanks to you that Arthur was born safely. If you remember, I didn't even realise I was in labour until my waters broke. You saved the day. I hope you realise you are much more than a housekeeper to us. I can't remember a time when you weren't part of this family. But now it's much more than that, because you delivered my precious Arthur safely, and here, in my parents' home."
Mrs. Headley glanced up from the suds in the sink. Her voice cracked when she spoke.
"That's a very kind thing to say, but it's important to remember my position. It's only because I love working here."
Sarah Taylor's heels clipped the tiles as she walked into the kitchen.
"Ah, there you are, Alice."
"I thought you were upstairs with the boys." Alice shook her head.
"No, Ma, I thought I'd help Mrs. Headley with the washing up. It's a lot for one person to do."
Stepping nearer, Sarah grinned. "Of course. I'll take over while you go up and help carry them into the basement and settle them down. Otherwise Freddie will be playing with them all night."
Alice frowned. "He enjoys making them laugh. I think it takes his mind off the war and being a police officer."
Sarah nodded. "That I do understand. Every day I pray we'll see an end to this terrible war." She reached out to take the tea towel. "Now go on and give them boys a kiss from me, and from Mrs. Headley." Laughing, Alice dried her hands on her apron.
"I will, thank you."
She tried to climb the stairs quietly, but every other step seemed to creak underfoot. She made her way to the bedroom door, leaning against the frame to watch her family. Freddie sat on the edge of Arthur's bed, his police uniform still crisp despite the late hour. His face, once boyish and carefree, now carried lines of worry and fatigue. But as he looked up and caught Alice's eye, a warmth spread through his features that made her heart skip. "All right, lads," Freddie said, ruffling Arthur's hair. "Time to go to the basement so you can get some sleep. You've got your brave knight to protect you from any monsters under the bed." He lifted Arthur up and held him tight. Alice strolled into the bedroom and kissed each boy in turn 3 times, then scooped David up into her arms.
"That was a kiss from Grandma, Mrs. Headley, and me."
Arthur yawned. He counted each person on his fingers.
"Grandma, Mrs. Headley, and you, Ma. There's 3 kisses."
Alice leaned in and hugged him tight.
"You're so clever. David is very lucky to have a big brother like you."
Freddie and Alice trundled down the stairs into the basement, ignoring the creaking floorboards as they went. Freddie opened the door and wrinkled his nose as the smell of dampness engulfed him. "I'll be glad when the children won't have to keep sleeping down here." Rays of daylight were still streaming into the basement as they laid the boys in their beds. David wriggled in his cot as Alice pulled a blanket over him. She turned and watched Freddie do the same with Arthur in his small bed. Alice yawned.
"Now close those eyes and I'll see you both in the morning."
She stepped quietly towards the stairs with one last glance over her shoulder.
"Good night and pleasant dreams."
As the boys settled down, Freddie joined Alice, wrapping an arm around her waist. "How was work today?" he asked, his voice low. Alice leaned into him, savouring the moment of closeness.
"Oh, you know, the usual. Books to sell and customers to please. Molly and Victoria send their love."
She paused, then added carefully,
"Freddie, I was thinking, maybe we could talk to Dr. Harrison about your nightmares. I mean, you look so tired, I'm assuming they're happening more often or getting worse. Apparently the doctor has been helping some of the other returned soldiers and—"
"Alice, we've been through this." Freddie's body stiffened and he pulled away slightly. "I'm fine. It takes time, that's all. I don't need to talk to anyone." Alice bit her lip, not wanting to push but worried all the same.
"I know, love. We're here for you, you know that, right? Me, the boys, and the family, for whatever you need."
Freddie's expression softened, and he pulled her close again, pressing a kiss on her forehead. "I know, Alice. I know. Come on, let's have a cup of tea before bed. You can tell me all about the latest scandals at Foyles." As they made their way to the kitchen, Alice couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on with Freddie than he was letting on. But for now, she would take this moment of peace, this slice of normality, and hold on to it with both hands. Victoria sat at her dressing table, her notebook open in front of her, every page filled with lists and sketches, each one a testament to everyone's determination to make her wedding to Ted perfect. But she knew it would never be that, because her mother and father were not there. There weren't going to be any words of wisdom from her mother, or her father proudly walking her down the aisle. She thought back to that day 8 years ago, when a policeman had knocked on the front door to tell her her parents had died in a train derailment in Brighton. At the time, she had never understood why her parents had gone to Brighton. But that day changed her life, along with the lives of her younger brother and sister, Stephen and Daisy. It had turned their world upside down. At 16 years old, Victoria had instantly taken on a mother's role to them. It was only a few years later, when Alice and Molly persuaded her to unlock her parents' bedroom door, that she started to get the answers she had been looking for. When she thought back to that troubled time, she realized they had all come a long way. Looking up, Victoria caught sight of her reflection in the mirror and the worry lines creasing her forehead. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts.
"Come in,"
she called, hastily arranging her face into a smile. The door handle turned, grating as it did. Ted pushed open the door and strolled in, his tall frame filling the doorway. He looked handsome in his civilian clothes, but Victoria couldn't help noticing the slight tremor in his hands, the way his eyes darted around the room as if searching for something.
"Hello, darling,"
Victoria said, rising to greet him with a kiss.
"I didn't expect you back until later. Is everything all right?"
Ted nodded, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Just thought I'd let you know the hospital seemed pleased with my eyesight. Apparently it's improved a little. But I don't think they're expecting it to get any better than it is now." He gestured to the array on the dressing table. "So how's the planning going? Looks like you've been busy." Victoria led him to sit on the edge of the bed, taking his hands in hers. They felt cold despite the warm June weather.
It's coming along.
She glanced back at the dressing table.
You know, I never wanted all this fuss. It feels like I've been swept along by everyone else.
For a moment, Ted's eyes seemed to focus, and he squeezed her hands. "You should have the day you want, and don't forget, you'll look beautiful no matter what." Victoria squeezed Ted's hands.
I don't want to let everyone down. There have been lots of offers of help, and with my grandfather in Brighton wanting to pay for the day, it seems churlish not to have a big day with all the works.
Ted peered down at their entwined hands for a moment, before looking up at her. "This wedding should have happened years ago, and if I hadn't been a coward and run away when your parents died, it would have done. All I care about is us being together, and your happiness. I can't get back the years we lost, but I love you with all my heart. So as long as we get married, that's all that matters to me." Victoria's heart raced, her eyes bleary from unshed tears.
That's all I want too. But how do I tell everyone?
She broke off as a car backfired in the street outside. Ted flinched violently, his body going rigid, eyes wide with fear. In an instant, he was no longer in the cozy bedroom, but back in the trenches, surrounded by the sounds of war.
Ted? Ted, it's all right. You're safe. It was just a car,
Victoria said softly, her heart breaking as she watched him struggle to come back to the present. Slowly, awareness returned to Ted's eyes. He looked at Victoria, shame and frustration evident in his expression. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "I don't know why I can't just forget it all." Victoria cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her gaze.
You have nothing to be sorry for. We'll get through this together. I promise. Maybe we could talk to someone. I've heard there are doctors who specialize in helping injured soldiers live with the things they've seen and heard.
No. Someone told me they use electric shock therapy, and I'm not putting myself forward for that. Who knows how that could end up? Ted pulled away, shaking his head. I just need time. I'll be fine, Victoria. Just plan our perfect day and not everyone else's. He stood up. I'll make us a cuppa. Don't worry. Everything is going to be all right. Victoria jumped up to follow him, but a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach held her where she was. She loved Ted with all her heart, but she couldn't shake the fear that their perfect day might be overshadowed by the war that felt like it would never end. And for Ted, perhaps it never would. After Ted left, Victoria sank back onto the bed, her eyes falling on the wedding plans scattered across her dressing table. The joy she had felt in planning their future together now seemed tainted by the harsh realities. She thought about the other war brides she knew, women who had married in haste before their sweethearts shipped out, or those who, like her, were trying to build a life with men forever changed by their experiences. And then, of course, there were those men who would never be coming home to their wives and sweethearts. None of their lives would ever be the same again. She reached for a framed photograph on her bedside table, a picture of her and Ted her father had taken just days before her parents died. Their smiles were carefree, their eyes full of hope and innocence. Victoria traced Ted's face in the photograph, remembering the boy he had been, loving the man he had become, scars and all. With a deep breath, she stood and returned to her dressing table. She may not be able to erase Ted's traumatic memories or heal his invisible wounds overnight, but she could create a day filled with love, support, and new joyful memories to stand alongside the painful ones. Victoria picked up her pen and began to write, not wedding plans this time, but a letter to Ted, pouring out her love, her fears, and her unwavering commitment to their future together. As she wrote, a new determination filled her. Their wedding might not be the fairy tale she had once imagined, but it would be real, honest, and a testament to the strength of their love. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, starting with this first step into their new life. Chapter 2. Molly stood in the large bedroom of the red brick four-storey house she shared with her husband, Andrew, in Berry Street. It had been his family home, very different to the small terraced house she had grown up in. Her mother and father had worked hard for the Gettin family, Alice's wealthy grandfather, which was how Molly and Alice became childhood friends. But Molly had always felt she was caught between the two worlds and never understood where she fitted in, despite being good friends with Alice and Victoria. Staring blankly at the small blue floral bowl with its matching jug, she felt so sick again. She had been feeling like this for at least a week now and was almost too scared to leave the room in case she vomited again. She took a deep breath. Her mother and father had been so proud when she married Andrew and moved into his big house. Molly sighed, remembering it took her father being taken into hospital to realise how important and loved they were. As an only child, she sometimes felt the burden of responsibility to produce grandchildren, but she never spoke about it, not even to her friends. Her stomach lurched up into her chest. Grabbing the bowl, she sat down on the edge of the bed and held it on her lap with her trembling hands. Was she pregnant? Was this the morning sickness she'd heard women talk about? If she was, it would be life-changing. Frowning, she wondered how Andrew would feel about becoming a father, especially as all his spare time was taken up with looking after soldiers returning from the front. Her mind whirled with a mixture of emotions: joy, fear, excitement, and overwhelming uncertainty. There was a light knock on the door, jolting Molly out of her troubled thoughts.
"Molly, are you all right in there?"
Andrew's soft voice came through the door, tinged with concern. She looked up as the door opened, and Andrew walked through the door.
Yes, I'm fine. I'm just feeling a little queasy. It must be something I've eaten,
she answered, her voice higher than usual. Taking a deep breath, Molly picked up the jug and poured some water into the bowl she was holding. Placing it on the chest of drawers, she quickly splashed some water on her face and looked at herself in the mirror. Did she look different already? Could Andrew tell? She wasn't ready to share the possibility yet, not until she'd had time to process it herself and know that it was true. Andrew's brows furrowed. He stepped forward and gently rubbed his hand up and down her back.
"You've been in here a while, and I was getting concerned."
Molly forced a smile.
I've got a bit of a headache coming on. What with that and feeling a little sick.
She sighed.
I'm sure it's nothing and will soon pass.
Andrew nodded, but she could see he wasn't entirely convinced.
"Would you like to have a lie down? I can leave you in peace."
He studied her.
"You do look a little pale."
Molly forced a smile.
Don't you go worrying about me. It will soon go.
Andrew's eyes didn't leave her.
"If you're sure, we can always get a doctor."
Molly's eyes widened.
No, honestly, I'll be all right.
Andrew shrugged and turned to head back to the living room. Following Andrew, Molly watched as he settled back into his armchair, surrounded by papers and pamphlets. The Silvertown munitions factory explosion, and all the devastation it caused, had changed everything. She remembered continually screaming out his name when she hadn't been able to find him amongst all the rubble, ignoring her own injuries. That was where Alice and Victoria had found her. She had been distraught at the thought of losing him. They had taken control and got Molly's wounds looked at and found out he could have been taken to hospital. They were up all night searching for him and did eventually find him unconscious, but safe. When Andrew recovered, he eventually accepted his old job back at the bank. He had worked there before the war started, but he struggled with going back. He talked about how he was no longer contributing to the war effort, at least at the factory he had been helping to get the munitions built and out to the front line. That was until he chatted to a veteran, begging in the street, and that made him realise he could be of use to those who had returned and had nothing. So when he wasn't working at the bank, he had thrown himself into veteran support work with a fervour that sometimes frightened her.
More letters to write?
Molly asked, perching on the arm of his chair. Andrew nodded, his eyes scanning a list of names.
"So many of the lads are struggling to adjust, let alone find work. Some were promised that their jobs would still be here when they returned from the front, but that wasn't always true. Someone's got to help them, you know, stand next to them, prop them up, and help fight their corner."
Molly thought about her friends at Foyles, Alice with her quiet strength, Victoria with her unwavering optimism. They had all changed so much since the war began, grown in ways they could never have anticipated. Perhaps if she is pregnant, this baby was her next step in that journey of growth and change. She ran her fingers through Andrew's hair, her heart swelling with love and pride, even as her own anxiety gnawed at her. How would he react to the news of the baby? Would he see it as a joy or another burden, in a world already weighing heavily on his shoulders? She caught sight of the newspaper on the side table. The headlines screamed about the war, about the mounting casualties and the strain on the home front. Her hand instinctively went to her still, flat stomach. What kind of world would she be bringing a child into?
Andrew,
she said softly, her heart pounding. He looked up, his eyes tired but attentive. Molly opened her mouth, the words on the tip of her tongue. But at the last moment she faltered.
I love you,
she said instead, leaning down to kiss him gently. Andrew smiled, some of the tension leaving his face. I love you too, Molly. More than ever. As Andrew leaned in to her touch, Molly decided to stick with her original resolution. She would wait to tell him, just for a little while, give herself time to come to terms with this possible new reality, to figure out how to share the news in a way that would bring light to Andrew's often shadowed eyes. For now, she would carry the secret close to her heart, a tiny spark of hope in uncertain times. Victoria hummed softly as she arranged flowers in a vase, the late afternoon sun streaming through the front room windows. She'd spent the morning at Foyles, but Mr. Ledbetter had insisted she take the afternoon off to finalise her wedding plans. She stood back and admired the flowers before leaning in to sniff their fragrance. She shook her head and thought about Mr. Ledbetter's kind gesture. The initial excitement of her engagement had worn off. In fact, sometimes she wasn't even convinced there would be a wedding. Since they had announced they were going to marry, Ted appeared to be more anxious and less able to relax. She had said the wedding could wait, but he said he wanted to marry her. Victoria sighed. They had booked the church, but she hadn't thought about her dress or the bridesmaids. The more she thought about it, the more she thought now was not the right time for Ted. She sniffed as tears rolled down her cheeks. Maybe it was never going to be the right time. Victoria knew she had to talk to Alice and Molly and be honest about everything she was thinking. Maybe she should walk to Alice's house to try and straighten out her mind before her confusion truly took hold. Walking into the hall, she glanced at herself in the mirror. Her lips tightened as she took in her ashen features and the darkness around her eyes. Grabbing her jacket off of the coat hook and pulling open the front door, Victoria stood rooted to the spot as she stared at Alice with her hand up, ready to knock on the door. Alice's eyes widened.
You made me jump. I thought I'd come and see you. I hope that's all right.
Victoria blinked rapidly.
Of course, I was just going to walk round to see you.
I went to Foyles, but Molly said Mr. Ledbetter had sent you home to finish off your wedding plans.
Alice paused. And the thing is, we haven't been shopping for your dress yet, so here I am.
Victoria stepped back into the hall.
Come on, I'll make some tea.
Alice stepped inside and shut the door behind her.
Don't worry about the tea. I'm just here because I want to either take you wedding dress shopping or find out what's going on.
Victoria forced a smile.
There's nothing going on.
She turned away and walked into her front room. Alice eyed her friend before following her.
I don't think that's true. But you were coming to see me, so you obviously wanted to talk to me about something, so we'll talk about that first.
Victoria took a deep breath before dropping her jacket on the back of the armchair. She turned to face Alice.
I'm worried about Ted. He's not in a good way, so I'm not even sure we should be getting married.
Do you still love him? I mean, do you want to marry him? Victoria nodded.
Does he want to marry you?
Again, Victoria nodded, trying to blink away the tears that were threatening to spill over her lashes. Alice shrugged.
Isn't that all that matters? You have waited a long time to be Ted's wife. We both thought it was never going to happen, and yet here we are.
Victoria flopped down onto the armchair.
I don't know. I can't help thinking he's got worse since we set the wedding date, so he's either changed his mind or something else is going on that he won't talk about.
Alice knelt at Victoria's feet and clasped her hands in hers.
It's probably to do with the war. I get the impression most men won't talk about it. Freddie's the same. It's like they're trying to protect us from it all. I understand, but don't they know they're worrying us more by not talking about it?
Victoria took a breath.
Last week I finally managed to persuade Ted to see Dr. Harrison, and despite his good reputation, Ted won't let me go in with him.
He has always said no to talking to anybody about it, but I think that's more out of fear he will be offered electric shock treatment, which none of us want him to have. But he's getting worse, and shutting out any help that's available isn't going to solve the problem."
Alice looked solemn as she jumped up.
"You know we can't help them if they don't want our help, and worrying won't change anything."
She forced herself to smile.
"I say we go out, take our minds off things, and buy your wedding dress. It's not long now, and we've all been so wrapped up in other things. We've let the excitement of your wedding drift away, and that's not right."
Victoria forced a smile.
"Thank you, but I don't think I'm going to have the wedding that everyone expects."
She took a deep breath.
"Don't be cross with me, but I'm not convinced it's even going to happen, so I don't want to waste my money on it."
Sadness washed across Alice's face.
"But you've wanted to be married to Ted for such a long time."
Looking thoughtful, she sat down in the nearby armchair.
"Right. Well, you sound determined not to buy a wedding dress, but we could still go to the shops and look around to see what the options are."
Victoria's throat tightened as she held her tears in check.
"That's very kind of you, but if it ends up happening, I'll wear something I have in the wardrobe. I just can't seem to think about it without being gripped with anxiety that something awful will happen."
Alice nodded.
"I understand the worry, but please don't let it spoil your day."
Victoria tried to focus on the happiness at marrying Ted, who she knew she couldn't love any more than she did. The sound of the front door opening made her smile.
"Ted?" she called out. "We're in the front room. How did it go with Dr. Harrison?"
There was no response, just the sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway. Victoria's smile began to fade.
"Ted? Is everything all right?"
She glanced at Alice before moving towards the door, but before she could reach it, Ted appeared in the doorway. The sight of him made her gasp. His face was ashen, his eyes wild and unfocused. His usually steady hands were shaking violently.
"Ted, darling, what's wrong?"
Victoria asked, reaching out to him. But as her hand touched his arm, Ted recoiled, his body going rigid. "No!" he shouted, his voice raw with fear. "Stay back! It's not safe!" Victoria froze, her heart pounding. She'd seen Ted have difficult moments before, but nothing like this.
"Ted, it's me. It's Victoria. You're home. You're safe."
But Ted didn't seem to hear her. His eyes darted around the room, seeing not their cosy front room, but some unseen horror. "Gas!" he cried out. "Everyone get your masks on! Be quick about it!" He stumbled backwards, knocking over a small table. The vase Victoria had just arranged crashed to the floor, water and flowers scattering across the rug. The sound seemed to jolt Ted. He blinked rapidly, confusion replacing the terror in his eyes. Victoria?" he mumbled.
"I'm here. You're home. And safe,"
she repeated, her voice calm despite the fear coursing through her. Slowly, recognition dawned on Ted's face. He looked around the room, taking in the overturned table, the scattered flowers, and Alice trying to hide her sadness. "Oh, God," he whispered, his face crumpling. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. At the doctor's there was a smell, something chemical that was so strong, and then—" Victoria rushed to him, enveloping him in her arms.
"Shh, it's all right."
As she held him, feeling his body shake with silent sobs, Victoria's mind raced. How could she help him? How could they build a life together with the war still raging in Ted's mind? But as she stroked his hair, murmuring words of comfort, she knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't give up on him, no matter what it took. The Sunday roast was a tradition in the Taylor household, a time for the growing family to come together and forget, if only for a few hours, about the troubles of the world outside. Alice sat at the crowded table, wedged between her younger brother, Charles, and her younger sister, Lily. The familiar chatter and clinking of cutlery a comforting backdrop. Arthur's laughter rang out from upstairs. Freddie peered across at Alice and matched her smile at their son's giggles. Their 3-year-old was obviously having fun with Mrs. Headley. The only thing that was missing was the roast meat. Alice could remember her father at the head of the table, carving the meat with practiced precision. But all of that was before the food shortages. Alice watched him as her mother ladled the stew onto plates before passing them around the table. The war had changed her father, and he was no longer its champion. Losing Alice's older brother, Robert, and seeing the men suffering on their return had affected him badly.
He had sat as a volunteer with men as they lay dying in the hospital, holding their hands until they had taken their last breath. Alice tried to reconcile the man before her, his silver hair neatly combed, his Sunday best impeccable, with the suspicions that had been gnawing at her for months, no matter how she tried to ignore them. She shook her head. The war had changed everyone. Thoughts of Ted jumped into her head. What if what she had seen at Victoria's was a regular occurrence? She'd talked to Molly to see whether they could help Victoria in some way. Ted appeared to be suffering more than Freddie. She sighed. There must be something they could do to help them both.
Pass the potatoes, would you, Alice?
Lily's voice broke through her reverie. As Alice handed over the dish, Lily leaned in close, her voice low.
Have you noticed anything odd about Father lately?
Alice frowned, glancing quickly at their parents to ensure they couldn't hear Lily. Odd how? Lily's eyes darted to their father before meeting Alice's gaze again.
Those business trips to Norfolk. Don't you think they've been more frequent? And longer?
A chill ran down Alice's spine. She had noticed, of course, but had pushed the thought aside, not wanting to give voice to her suspicions. She forced a smile. I think since you've become a policewoman, you're always looking for dubious behaviour, even where there isn't any. He's always had business in Norfolk. If I remember rightly, he used to go there a lot before the war started, she whispered back. So what are you getting at, Lily? Her sister's expression was a mix of worry and determination.
I went into his office to get some paper, and it felt like I had interrupted something. He clearly wasn't pleased to see me and immediately covered the letter he was writing, and to my mind he looked guilty of something. So it makes me wonder what he could be guilty about. I mean, do you think he's having an affair or something?
None of it feels like business to me. Alice wondered for a moment what Freddie would make of this conversation. She opened her mouth to respond, to defend their father, or demand more information. She wasn't sure which, when her brother's low tones cut through their whispering. Charles leaned in towards them. What are you two whispering about? Alice nudged his arm. Nothing. Lily's just messing about. You know, girl stuff. Their mother Sarah glanced across at them. Girls, is everything all right? You're being awfully secretive, so I'm intrigued. Both sisters straightened up, plastering on smiles.
Just girl talk, Mother,
Lily said smoothly.
Alice was telling me about a particularly demanding customer at Foyles.
As the conversation around the table turned to other topics, the latest news from the front, the upcoming church fete, Alice found herself studying her father more closely. Was there a hint of guilt in his eyes when he glanced at their mother? A slight hesitation in his usually confident manner? Or was she simply seeing what Lily's suspicions had primed her to look for? As the meal wound down and the family moved to the sitting room for tea, Alice felt a weight settle in her stomach. He had always been a stickler about the girls not working and how it would make them look bad if they got jobs, but when they took up war work, he was proud and told anyone who would listen. She loved her father, had always seen him as a pillar of strength and integrity, even if some of his ideas were old-fashioned. The thought that he might be leading a double life, that there might be another family in Norfolk. It was almost too painful to contemplate. But as she caught Lily's meaningful glances, Alice knew she couldn't simply ignore the possibility. For her mother's sake, for the sake of the family she loved, she would have to dig deeper. The truth, whatever it might be, was out there, and Alice was determined to find it. Perhaps she'll talk to Freddie about it all. He was always logical in his thinking. Except when it came to looking after himself. Chapter 3. Alice's hands trembled as she held the yellowed envelope. Her father's familiar handwriting addressing it to an unfamiliar name in Norwich. It felt like she was meant to see the letter, especially it was only a few days after having that conversation with Lily at the dinner table. She studied the unposted envelope hard. Had someone been waiting to hear from him? Sadness overwhelmed her. She had stumbled upon it quite by accident, tucked away in an old book while helping her mother clear out the attic only 2 days ago. Now, sitting cross-legged on her bedroom floor, surrounded by dust particles dancing in the late afternoon sunlight, she felt as though she was standing on the edge of a precipice. She knew she shouldn't read it. She had been telling herself that since she found it. It was private, not meant for her eyes. But the niggling doubts that had been plaguing her, The whispered conversations between her parents that had stopped abruptly when she entered a room, the frequent business trips to Norfolk that never quite added up. Lily's suspicions? It all seemed to converge on this moment, this letter. With a deep breath, Alice carefully extracted the letter from its envelope, unfolding it with reverent care. As she began to read, her eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat.
My dearest Margaret, the letter began, I cannot express how much joy your news has brought me. A son, I can scarcely believe it. I find myself daydreaming about him, wondering whose eyes he has, whose smile.
Alice felt as though the floor had dropped out from beneath her. A son? Her father had another child. The implications whirled through her mind, each more distressing than the last. How long had this been going on? Did her mother know? And this child, their half-brother, did he know about them? She read on, her hands shaking so badly she could hardly make out the words. Her father wrote of his torn feelings, his love for this Margaret and their child warring with his duty to his family in London. He spoke of the impossibility of their situation, of the pain of living a double life. As she reached the end of the letter, Alice felt tears streaming down her face. Her watery gaze jumped to the top of the page. She gasped at the date. 30th of March, 1903. Alice wiped her fingers across her wet cheeks. The father she thought she knew, steadfast, honourable, devoted to her mother, suddenly seemed like a stranger. The foundations of her world, already shaken by the war, now felt as though they were crumbling beneath her feet. A soft knock at her door made Alice jump. She hastily folded the letter and shoved it under her pillow. "Come in," she called, trying to keep her voice steady. Her mother entered, a concerned look on her face. "Alice, dear, are you all right? You've been up here for hours." Alice nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Her mother's presence, usually a comfort, now felt like an accusation. How could she look at her mother, knowing what she knew? How could she keep this secret? As her mother chatted about the progress they'd made in the attic, Alice's mind raced. Should she confront her father? Tell her mother? Pretend she'd never found the letter? The weight of this knowledge pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe. "Alice?" Her mother's voice cut through her thoughts. "You look pale, darling. Are you sure you're feeling well?" Alice managed a weak smile. "Just tired, I think. It's been a long day and I'm worried about Victoria." She sighed. "Ted isn't in a good place, and she's refusing to buy herself a wedding dress. It's not fair. She's wanted to marry Ted for so long, and I think she believes it isn't going to happen." Her mother nodded sympathetically. "I don't know what to say. Maybe it's all too much for her and they need to postpone it for a while. Or you could always suggest to Victoria that she wears your dress, if it will fit her." Sarah paused. "The trouble is, everyone is war-weary. It's gone on for nearly 4 years now, and the men that are coming back are troubled, admittedly some more than others. But we can only be there for the people who need us." Stepping towards the door, she frowned. "Your father's trips to Norfolk are becoming more frequent," she said, an odd note in her voice. "I do hope his business there wraps up soon. I worry about him travelling. After all, you never know where or when the bombs are going to fall." As the door closed behind her mother, Alice felt a chill run down her spine. Did her mother suspect something? Or was Alice simply reading too much into an innocent comment? The bedroom door swung open again. "Oh, Freddie, you made me jump." Freddie studied her for a moment. "Are you all right? As your mother would say, you look a little peaky." The door clicked as he shut it behind him. Alice took a deep breath. "I'm glad you're here. I've been wanting to talk to you about Father." Freddie frowned. "What about him?" Alice tightened her mouth for a moment. Freddie took a couple of steps to sit on the bed next to his wife. He rested his hand on hers. "What is it?" She closed her eyes. "I don't know how to say it, but to put it bluntly, Lily and I were wondering if Father had another life in Norfolk." She blurted it out, her words tumbled over each other. "After all, he's always going there, and he's never offered to take us with him. Maybe he has a secret life we know nothing about." Freddie chuckled. "I've never heard anything so ridiculous. This is Lily's doing, isn't it?
Your father has always been a man of moral standing. Remember when I asked for your hand in marriage in the interrogation that followed that?"
He leaned in and gave his wife a hug.
"Don't let Lily lead you astray. She's never had much time for your father."
Freddie stood up and walked over to his side of the bed.
"I've got to go back to work. I only popped home for some papers I'd forgotten."
He picked up a stack of pages. They rustled as he straightened them before walking towards the door.
"Are you all right, Alice? I don't want to leave you if you're upset."
Alice forced a smile. "Don't worry. Get back to work. I don't want you getting into trouble."
Freddie smiled. "I'm a sergeant, so there's no fears of that happening."
He quickly stepped back towards her and gave her a light kiss on the top of her head.
"I'll be back soon."
He rushed out of the bedroom, leaving behind him the sound of the creaking stairs as he ran down them. Alice retrieved the letter from under her pillow. Perhaps she should have shown it to Freddie. But his reaction to just the thought of it all told her now wasn't the time. She stared down at it as if it might offer some solution. But she knew the answers she sought wouldn't be found in these faded words. She would have to dig deeper to uncover the truth that had been hidden from her for so long. As the sun set outside her window, casting long shadows across her room, Alice made a decision. She would go to Norfolk herself, find this Margaret and the half-brother she'd never known. Whatever the consequences, whatever pain it might cause, she had to know the truth. With a new sense of purpose, Alice carefully resealed the letter in its envelope. The war had already changed so much in their world. Now it seemed it was time for the secrets closer to home to come to light as well. Whatever she discovered in Norfolk, Alice knew her life would never be the same again. Victoria stood in front of the military history section, reorganizing the books that had become disheveled.